Today, we're gonna break down some kickstep variations. This is a footwork concept that is foundational to hip hop dance. So in this video, we're gonna go over some basic, classic variations of the step that you can utilize within your own practice. And we're also gonna break down a few concepts and drills that will help you to further integrate these ideas into your personal style. So let's just hop into it. Now, when it comes to a step like the kick step, understanding the fundamental mechanic of the step is the key to unlocking more variation. Formulating an understanding of the step in its most basic and fundamental form will aid us in our exploration of more complicated variations of the step. Just like learning to read, we have to learn our alphabet before we can learn to put words together. So to get started, we're gonna break down a kick step in its most basic form. And then from there, we'll continue to add layers of complexity and variation that we can integrate into our personal practice. So make sure you stick around till the end of this video because you don't wanna miss out on these variations. So when it comes to a kick step, the basic pattern that we're going to be following with our feet is just as the name suggests. We're simply going to find a kick and a step. A kick and a step. Over and over and over and over. Very handy that it's called the kick step. So before we get started with the actual pattern of the feet for this step, we're going to find this simple double tempo bounce within our body and sort of think about establishing this as a base or a foundation for the step that we're about to do. This bounce exists on the double tempo rhythm, so we simply find 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Understanding that sort of base layer is going to be the key for not only keeping us on time as we execute this step, but it's also going to aid in helping us to properly transition from the right to left foot as we do this step. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. You'll see how that comes into play in just a second. So to get started with this step, what we're going to do is we're going to find a bit of a prep with our right foot. Sort of thinking about hopping onto our left foot on the and before the 1. So we start 5, 6, 7, 8, and from here, we're simply going to think about kicking our right foot forward, but not just kicking and leaving the rest of our body stagnant. Instead, we're gonna think about kicking our right foot as we perform a little hop with our left foot. That would look something like this: 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1. This and count prep before we kick on the 1 is a very important concept to understand, particularly for variations of the kick step, but also just for hip hop dance in general. So we've kicked our right foot on 1, then from here, we're simply going to repeat that same exact pattern with our left foot. Hopping onto our right foot on and, sort of finding this prep position that we did before, and then on 2, finding a kick with our left foot, as well as a hop with our right foot. 2. Now, it might seem kind of silly to be breaking down a step this simple in such detail, but over the course of the years that I've spent teaching this step, what I've found is that what truly makes a difference with this step and what makes it actually look authentic and as if you have an understanding of how to do the step properly is your attention to the details of the step, specifically when it comes to transitioning between your right and left foot. And so understanding things like the preparation on the and count before the 1 and also how to properly switch or juggle between your feet is what's going to make a true difference in your execution of the step. So to give this step a shot with a little bit of rhythm, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. Over and over and over again. Now when it comes to the kick step, there are a couple of different things to think about that don't actually have a lot to do with the pattern that we're creating with our feet. One of those things being this upper body rock that we want to find as we're executing the step. For me, as sort of a base for this step, I like to think about integrating a simple forward rock pattern with my upper body as I'm playing around with this footwork pattern. The timing of the rock with my upper body is going to be 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Basically, every time I kick one of my feet to the front, I'm also thinking about rocking my upper body forward towards my foot. So as opposed to just executing this step with a straight upper back, looking very stiff, I can think about integrating my chest and my shoulders, which makes my execution look that much more full body. To break that down a little bit slower, as we find our prep here on the and before the 1, bringing our right foot back, we also can think about rocking our upper body just slightly backwards so that when we kick on one, we can bring our shoulders forward along with our foot. 7, 8, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. We can think about rocking back on the and count and rocking forward on the full count. Another idea that we can remain mindful of is this concept of our posture as we're executing this step. Now, we just talked about a specific pattern with our upper body that we can utilize as we're playing around with this vocabulary. But even if we're integrating this idea of rocking forward every time we kick our foot to the front, we can still make that look stiff if we're not holding the proper posture in our upper body. I like to think about it like this. When it comes to ballet, there's a very specific posture that we find, particularly in our upper body. Specific ways of presenting yourself, of using your head, and of conveying a certain essence simply by just maintaining a specific posture. Just as there is a specific posture that is utilized whether you're in class or performing a piece within ballet to convey a specific essence, within hip-hop, there's a particular posture and stylization that we can find in our upper body that will help to make our execution of specific steps look more authentic to the style. To give sort of a visual example, this posture is not exactly ideal for conveying the essence of hip-hop dance. This posture might be good for something like river dancing. It might even aid in the execution of particular footwork vocabulary. But when it comes to hip-hop vocabulary, and when it comes to trying to convey and harness the essence of hip-hop dance and the style that we're supposed to embody, this positioning is not exactly useful for us. So in addition to this rock pattern that I'm finding in my upper body as I play around with this footwork, I like to think about finding a very loose, relaxed, sort of funky posture in my upper body as I'm playing around with this pattern. And there's not one right way to do it. It has a lot more to do with the intentions that you have behind your execution of the step. And so I think that if we can find a more relaxed posture in our upper body as we're playing around with integrating this rock pattern, it's going to make our execution of this step look just that much more authentic. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jed, we've got the feet, and Jed, we've got the upper body, but what am I supposed to do with my arms? I'm glad you asked. When it comes to the kick step, I don't find that there's one single pattern that is correct to utilize when it comes to your arms. But as sort of a default when it comes to teaching this step, I like to think about sort of utilizing this concept of throwing my hands forward, and particularly thinking about throwing the opposite hand of the foot that I'm kicking. When it comes to this type of vocabulary, there are a few key patterns that we can utilize to help give us some structure and direction when it comes to our arms. But so much of it has to do with your own personal exploration and your own personal stylization, particularly when it comes to your arms. But until you are feeling comfortable enough with the step to start exploring some of your own variation with your arms, I would say that finding this sort of opposite arm as leg throwing pattern is a totally acceptable and safe place to go, just to sort of get you used to integrating your arms into this step as you're practicing it. And even within that, there's a lot of personal exploration to be done. You can be more aggressive and sharp with your arms. You can be smoother and softer. You could play around with different hand shapes, making a fist, opening your hands, pointing, slicing. So at the very least, be sure to take some time to think about exploring this idea of integrating your arms as you're practicing this step. I like to think about throwing my arms at the same time as I kick my feet. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I feel that that sort of helps to get us headed in the right direction with our exploration of our arms. So now that we've talked a little bit about the upper body, let's switch back down to our feet. Now it's all well and good if we have the particular pattern that we're supposed to follow with our feet, but if our feet themselves look like lazy, floppy fish, it's not going to matter how correctly we execute the pattern because it's just going to look lazy. So a couple of key ideas to think about when it comes to your feet is thinking about finding a nice clean flex with the foot every time we kick. Now, a concept that was super helpful in reminding me to keep my feet flexed as I was playing around with this type of vocabulary was to imagine that I was being filmed from the front, but particularly being filmed from a very low angle. And that in the video, they would shoot from a super low angle, sort of up and towards the artist as they were performing. Sometimes the artist would be sort of dancing or just gesturing as he was performing to the camera. So I like to think about trying to show off the bottom of my foot to the person who is filming me on the floor every time I kick my feet. This helps me to maintain a nice clean angle of the feet every time I kick. And it also helps me to avoid this sort of floppy fish foot position that is so easy to fall into if you're not being conscious of it. Simply thinking about maintaining energy and lightness in the feet as we execute this step is super important. So in addition to thinking about keeping our feet flexed, we can also think about this idea of being light and nimble on our feet. Yeah? Maintaining control over your footwork. Not just sort of stomping around and being lazy with your feet, but being light and nimble. Thinking about there being energy in your feet rather than just your feet flopping forward. So now that we've broken down some of the more technical components of the step, we're now going to break down a couple of different patterns and drills that you can utilize to further integrate this type of vocabulary into your personal practice. The first of those being just a basic, simple kick step. Simply training and repeating this motion over and over again might feel mundane, but it is extremely valuable. I think this concept of never outgrowing the basics is an extremely important one for all dancers to understand. Just like how in ballet class, we never stop doing pliés in first position, when it comes to hip hop, I don't think that we should view the basics or our foundation as something that we learn one time and then just sort of move on from. So for our first pattern, simply thinking about playing around with just a basic kick step and trying to be conscious of all of those things that we just talked about a moment ago. Integrating a rock with our upper body, thinking about the posture that we're holding as we execute the step. Flexing and remaining energetic in our feet as we juggle and shift between positions. Thinking about your arms and the role that they play, how you can utilize them to sort of cultivate your own particular style or your own particular execution of a basic vocabulary step. And so even with a pattern as simple as this, I think that there's a lot of valuable things that we can glean from it. The second pattern that we can utilize when we're playing around with this footwork is this concept of changing our placement in the room that we're dancing in as we're executing the step. When you start to play around with this vocabulary, one of the most useful things that you can learn how to do is to learn how to be mobile with it and to not simply get stuck in one spot in the room. Even if you're playing around with a lot more complicated variations, if all you ever do is stay underneath yourself, it's gonna get kind of boring pretty fast. So thinking about what it would look like as we're performing the step to move our body side to side, front and back, and just around the room. And while we move around the room, not allowing that to affect the sequence or the pattern of the step that we're executing. Being able to maintain the pattern consistently on the same tempo, even when we're moving around. This is an extremely helpful idea, and I think that it'll help us to develop more mobility in our execution of this type of vocabulary. And then the third idea that we can play around with is this concept of changing our body facing. By that simply meaning the direction that our body is facing as we're executing the step. So in the last one, we played around with changing specifically where our body was in the room that we're dancing in. Now for this idea, we're gonna more so play around with the direction that we are facing in the room that we're dancing in. Now you could face any different direction. You could switch between the four corners of the room, switch between the four walls, simply turn in a circle continuously. I think that this idea is useful because it helps us to not get so stuck facing one direction as we practice the different variations with this step. We can sort of integrate ourselves more into the room that we're dancing in. We can be more interactive with the space around us. And so just by thinking about these three simple concepts, we have so many ideas that we can play around with and explore even when we're just executing a super basic step like the kick step. And I truly believe that diving deep into these concepts, even while we're just exploring the most simple variation of this step, is extremely valuable. And it'll help for us to lay a more extensive foundation whereupon we can add more layers of complexity. So now that we've broken down the step itself and a couple of different ways that we can play around with the step, we're gonna now break down 3 simple drills that you can utilize to integrate this type of vocabulary into your personal practice. And the first drill that we're gonna break down is a drill that I like to call the 4 corners drill. The basic idea behind this drill is to utilize the 4 corners of the room that you are dancing in. Now, granted, we might not all be dancing in a perfectly square room or a room that has 4 corners, And in that case, you can simply just envision on the floor or the space that you are dancing, a giant box that you are standing in the middle of. Once you have that mapped out in your brain, you can simply assign the 4 points that are going to act as your 4 corners for this drill. Now you can do this drill in a square room going straight across. I usually like to think about doing this drill going diagonally. That way I'm actually shifting between the 4 corners as opposed to the 4 walls. But either way is completely fine. So to get started with this drill, we're simply going to think about finding 4 kick steps to the front corner. We'll start by going 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Then from here, I'm going to repeat the same exact pattern, simply facing the right corner. I'm going to rotate over my right shoulder. And 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. 4 kicks to the right corner. From here, the same exact thing. I'm going to continue my rotation to face the back. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. To then finish it off with 4 kicks to the left corner, starting with my right foot. And 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. Now this drill is just a super simple way that we can start to play around with changing our body facing as we execute the footwork pattern. Now before we move on to our next drill, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a quick example of this one with some music. This drill, we're going to think about this concept of changing the placement of our body in the room that we're dancing in. To start, we're simply going to think about establishing a sort of middle point or a home base point in the center of the room, and then from here, traveling to different points in the room for specified amounts of time. To start, we're going to travel to the left for 4 counts, and then return to center for 4 counts. From there, we're going to travel to the right for 4 counts, return to the center for 4 counts. Vice versa to the front, 4 counts to the front, 4 counts back to center, 4 counts to the back, 4 counts back to center. All the while maintaining this pattern consistently. So that'll look something like this. 5, 6, 7, 8. We go 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. Now there are obviously different variations that you can play around with this drill. Instead of going side, side, front, back, you could go front, side, back, side. You could go side, back, side, front. Or instead of changing the specific path that you travel while you perform the exercise, you could think about simply limiting the time that you travel in a specific direction. So instead of 4 counts, you could limit it to 2 counts. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There's lots of different ways that you can play around with this idea as well. For my example, I'm going to think about traveling out for 4 counts to travel in for 4 counts to start with, and then from there I'll travel out for 2 counts and travel back in for 2 counts in every direction. Let's just go ahead and give it a shot with some music. And then the third and final drill that we're going to break down is sort of an amalgamation of the first 2 drills that we just broke down. We're going to think about combining these ideas of changing our body's facing and our body's placement in the room into one drill. And this could be done in a couple of different ways. The first example that I'm going to give you is to think of utilizing the 4 corners drill. However, as opposed to simply just staying in the center the whole time, we're going to now explore what it would look like to travel at the same time as we're shifting between each of the 4 points. I typically will do this exercise moving in a straight line across the floor. If you want to explore some more complicated variations, that's totally fine. But for this video, we're simply going to think about finding the back corner of the room that we're dancing in and then traveling in a straight line to the corner directly across from us. And this could be done in any corner of the room. Just make sure that you're moving diagonally across the floor. To demonstrate this idea, I'm going to utilize this corner as my front corner. I'm going to perform the same sequence that I would if I were performing the 4 corners drill all by itself. 4 kicks to the front, 4 kicks to the side, 4 kicks to the back, 4 kicks to the other side. The difference is that at the same time, I'm going to be traveling from this corner to that corner. The trick is to steadily move across the floor without changing or interrupting the sequence of the feet while we're moving. So let's give it a shot. We have 5, 6, 7, 8. We go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. You don't have to travel in a straight line across the floor. You could create a different pattern, say a square or a circle. Simply think about creating a pattern or a line that your body has to follow as you are performing the 4 corners drill. Simply think about changing your placement in the room as you perform this drill. That can be done by going across the floor in a straight line or creating a different pattern on the floor that better suits the space that you're dancing in. For example, let's try a little circle right here. We have 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now that's one example of a way that you could play around with this drill. Another example is to think about the second drill that we did of starting at a center point and traveling out in each direction for a specified length of time, while at the same time now incorporating a new layer of changing our body facing as we move to and from our center point. Let me show you what I mean. Instead of simply facing the front the whole time that I do this drill, I could instead think about what it would look like to change my body facing while still following the pattern that I laid out for myself. When I move out from my center point, I could turn my body to face the side. And when I move back to my center point, I could turn my body to face the center. Or I could simply just think about turning my body away from the direction that I'm traveling, always moving backwards. Depending on the amount of time that you allot to travel out and to travel back in, you could also play around with switching your body facing multiple times as you travel from one point to another. If I travel out for 4 counts and back in for 4 counts, I could switch my body facing every 2 counts. An example would be like this: 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And those are just a couple of different examples that we can play around with when it comes to combining these 2 drills that we've broken down. Now you can see that by just incorporating a few simple ideas, there's a lot of variation that can be found even when we're playing around with such a basic step. So be sure to try these drills out and to add your own spin to them, make them work for you and what your body needs. Be mindful of the space that you're dancing in and don't feel like you have to do these drills exactly like I did them in order for them to be effective. These drills and ideas are more so just offerings or thoughts that I'm presenting to you that you can now utilize in your own way. You can either do them exactly as I'm doing them or just take bits and pieces of them to sort of create an exercise that is more constructive for your personal practice. Now before we go, I'm gonna turn on some music and give you guys an example of some ways that I would play around with these ideas myself. Let's just go ahead and hop into it. it for our breakdown of the Kickstep. I hope that these drills and these patterns will prove useful for you guys and that you found value in them. If you have any further questions or if you would like any further breakdown on these concepts, be sure to comment down below. You can also reach out to me at The Shed on Instagram or TikTok, and be sure to check the first link in the description. That will take you straight to The Shed's page on Patreon. We have some exclusive content over there that is not available here on YouTube, so be sure to go and to join as a free member so that you can get access to all of that and so that you can stay up to date with all of the fun and exciting things that we've got going on here at The Shed. It's been so good being back here in The Shed, and I just want to thank you guys so much for your continued support of me, this channel, and for your time in watching this video. I'm gonna see y'all in the next one. Peace out.